Tonight we will be hearing from Ian Cleary, a lightning process practitioner from Australia, giving his insights into chronic pain. I had to practice that a few times to say lightning process practitioner. Ian will cover modern pain science with a focus on the brain's role in the pain experience, as well as how ongoing pain ties in with neuroplasticity. Ian is an advanced lightning process practitioner specializing in chronic fatigue syndrome and chronic pain, and works with a range of other conditions such as anxiety, depression, and PTSD. He pioneered the lightning process in Australia and New Zealand and now runs clinics of both those two countries. He's a passionate advocate for educating and empowering people to take charge of their health and finds this work incredibly satisfying. As with all our public lectures, the views, thoughts and opinions expressed by our guest speaker belong to him, and we look forward to hearing Ian speak on the pain revolution. Now, without further ado, please welcome Ian to the stage.
So thank you, everyone. I got really curious about pain back in 1999, and I can tell you the time and place precisely. I was in a doctor's surgery in intense and excruciating back pain, terrifying back pain. And I was looking up at a doctor, looking at a scan of my back, and I was waiting for the news. And in 1999, I learned I'd broken my back. Now, I would love to tell you that this is a hero story, that I went through months of painful rehab, and through sheer grit and determination, I learned to walk on standing here, blah, blah, blah. That's not my story. My story is so boring. It's so boring. I'm going to tell it to you tonight, because it really captures chronic pain. So when I say that I learned that I'd broken my back, what actually happened was the doctor turned to me and he said, "Ian, when did you break your back?" No. It's an old injury. Now, I was a young 20-odd-year-old, and this was the very first time that I had experienced back pain. I hadn't broken my back, as far as I knew. I said, "Yeah, there's an old fracture here." I said, "So is that the pain?" I said, No, that's not it. And then he pointed out some bone spurs that had a really scary name. I went, "Oh, so is that the pain?" No, it's in a different spot. "So what's the pain?" And he looked at it and he said, "Well, there's nothing there. There's no injury, no damage. You'll be fine. Take it easy for a couple of days, and I'm sure you'll be okay." And I was. How boring is that story? That's such a boring story. But that captures pain wonderfully. So I left there really curious about pain. I learned that you can break your back and not even know about it. And I also learned that you can be in the most intense, excruciating pain in your life and not have anything to show for it. And later on I met a lady who would become my wife, and she was suffering from intense, debilitating chronic fatigue, ME, chronic fatigue syndrome. And all her tests were showing nothing's wrong, everything's fine. And she was being told, take it easy, manage yourself, pace yourself, be careful, and just rest. And she rested and she rested. And 7 years later, she's still resting, and if anything, it's getting worse. And she took the bold and controversial decision to approach that from a brain-based perspective. She flew off to London, and just to put a perspective around it, I said goodbye to a lady who needed a wheelchair to get onto that flight. And 5 weeks later, she comes home well. And at the time, I was already a hypnotherapist, so I already knew that pain and fatigue were curiously flexible, but I didn't understand them. And so I flew the family to London, and I retrained in the technique that she used, the lightning process. And I've gone on to study more about pain and pain education. And so now, as Nikki said, I specialise in chronic pain and chronic fatigue conditions. I've learned a lot more about pain and pain education. And this is the spoiler for the whole talk. This is the spoiler alert. We really need to think about pain very differently. And we need to talk about pain very, very differently. Because the understanding of pain that we all grew up with has changed. There's been a massive paradigm shift in the pain sciences, massive. And I liken it to going from thinking the world is flat to thinking the world is round. It feels like that big. So the model of pain that we grew up with, the biomechanical model of pain, it sees pain purely through the lens of anatomy and structure and pathology and tissue damage. And I call it the find it and fix it model. And we've now shifted from that. There's been this massive paradigm shift towards understanding the role the brain plays in pain. So that's what I want to look at tonight. I want to look at the role that the brain plays in pain. And that might be new for some people. That might be new. I also want to look at neuroplasticity. There might be a term that you know, it might be new to you, and that might stretch you a little bit as well. But we're going to look at the role that the changing brain plays. But those two bits of information, that pain is generated in the brain, and the brain is highly changeable and trainable, that is brilliant news for a lot of people that are stuck in pain. So by really embracing contemporary pain science, what that allows us to do is to give people options that they might not have realised they had, and that's exciting. That's really exciting. And for some people it means, well, for some people in some pain conditions, we're talking about a full recovery, and that's fantastic. I often say to people, the best thing you can do for chronic pain is stretching. But not stretching your body, I'm talking about stretching your mind. So really thinking about pain in a very, very different way. So I'm aware that probably in this room that there's a mix of experiences. Some of you might be here because you're suffering from chronic pain, or you might know someone suffering from chronic pain. There might be some students here learning about pain, nursing or medicine, and there might be some people that work with chronic pain. So I guess there might be a bit of a mix. So let's look at where people are. We've got a lot to cover tonight. So the best way that the brain learns is to relax. So I want everyone just to take a deep breath in. I found a lovely image here to help us relax. I think I've even got a soundtrack there. So just notice what your body does as you take a nice deep breath in. The brain learns best when you're relaxed. Just notice. Okay. So we know that the brain's primary role is protection. Now that is a massive, massive ask for an organ that's stuck inside a skull, surrounded by bone, that has no access to the outside world except through your senses. So just then, your brain was receiving information from your eyes, from your ears, but it was also cross-referencing that with information already coded and embedded in your brain from past experience. Now that is a very clever thing. That is a very clever thing that the brain does to keep us safe. But it can also be problematic. It can also be overprotective. So right now, if we had sensors on you, we would have detected changes in your body, in your physiology. Your pupils would have changed, your adrenals would have changed, your breathing would have changed, your thinking would have changed. Your brain decided that the threat was big enough to your personal safety that it prepared you for a shark attack. We're probably 30 k's from the ocean here, at a guess. We're in a hall, surrounded by people. The chance of shark attack, you'd have to say, is pretty small. But here's the thing, the brain is not smart. The brain is not smart. We have to stop talking about the brain being smart. The brain is protective. We can learn to be smart, that's something different, but the brain is protective. And that's really what I want to explore that tonight. I want to explore this protective nature of the brain and pain's role in that. So, tonight might stretch you. That's a good thing. I want it to stretch you and hopefully stretch you towards more options. And that includes if you're suffering from pain or you work in pain, because options are a really, really good thing. So let's do a quick little pop quiz. I'm going to put up a statement and I want you to just have a sense of it. Is this statement an accurate reflection of your understanding of pain? So we've got these two terms, acute pain and chronic pain. And even those terms are sometimes misunderstood. Acute pain means there's an injury. Chronic pain means an injury hasn't healed properly or there's some kind of ongoing damage. How does that sit with everyone? Okay, so we would say that both of these statements are no longer in line with modern pain research. Okay, so that might stretch a bit. Okay, let's get a bit technical. Pain receptors in the body send a pain message to the brain. Bit technical? No, I would say we don't have pain receptors. They're certainly not sending a pain message to the brain. Okay, pinched nerves always hurt. No. Nerve pain is more painful than muscle pain? No. Back pain can be caused by a slipped disc or a herniated disc. Might have heard that before. No. Arthritis is painful? No. The amount of arthritis will determine the amount of pain someone feels. Nope. I threw this one in. Kidney stones are more painful than childbirth. No, that one's true. I've given birth to 3 bouncing baby kidney stones. And it was a piece of cake. So I don't know what you were talking about with this childbirth thing. No, we cannot compare pain experiences either. So, that to me highlights the magnitude of the shift that we've gone through. Because all of these statements are perfectly reasonable statements. You'll hear these statements. You might even hear these statements from healthcare practitioners, doctors, and some specialists. And that's because this pain revolution has been a slow process. So it started around 30 years ago. It started in the research labs. And it's been slow to trickle down to the teaching universities and then to the GPs and certainly to the people on the streets. So we now have a situation where some of us are still working with an outdated understanding of pain. And by that I also mean some professionals, which is a major problem when you consider how big the pain issue is. So let's dive into it. But let's have a little bit of a stretch. Before we do, there's 2 words I want you to listen out from. I've been doing this for 12 years and I've talked to a lot of people about pain. There's 2 words that I hear a lot. Yeah, but. Yeah, but Ian, my pain is different. Yeah, but Ian, my scan says this. Yeah, but Ian, my doctor told me this. Yeah, but. And yeah, but is the polite version. I've certainly heard a lot worse over the years as well. So I get the yeah buts, I really do. We all do it in certain circumstances, and we do it when we feel our beliefs being threatened. We do it when we think our story is being challenged. And here's the thing, that's exactly what I want to do tonight. I want to challenge your beliefs. And so it's highly likely that in this room tonight there might be some little inner yeah buts going on in your head. That's okay. But listen out for them and be aware of them and just check in. Is this inner yeah but shutting down options? Or is it opening up options? And is your little inner but in line with modern pain research? So you've got a choice. And if there's a little inner yeah but, I would just say, what are you going to protect? What are you going into battle for? And is that really, really worth it? So let's go. What is pain? Such a big question. What is pain? And so we will go to the peak body on this one. We will go to the International Association for the Study of Pain. Pain is an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience that is associated with tissue damage or potential tissue damage or described in such terms. We good? We go home? Go for drinks? There it is. Needs a little bit of exploring, but there is one word that I really want to draw your attention to. Pain is an experience. Pain is an experience. It is not a thing. And most of us grew up in a model of pain and saw pain as a thing. Pain is an experience. So it's not like blood or bones. Certainly not like broken bone or pinched nerves. They're things. Pain is an experience. Pain is also not an action, like digestion, or inflammation, or nerve transmission. It's not that. Pain is an experience. Like love is an experience. Pain is an experience, which means there is not an instrument on this planet, there's not a machine on this planet that can measure pain. All we can do is look someone in the eye and go, tell me about your pain. That's all we can do, because it's an experience. And if we're going to get clinical, we'll go, rate your pain out of 1 to 10, where 10 is the most extreme pain you've ever held, blah, 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 blah. So we cannot see pain. We can't look at a scan and point to pain. You can't look at two scans and say, this person is going to be in pain and this person is not going to be in pain. You can't look at two scans of knee arthritis and go, this person will be in pain, this person will be in more pain. They might not be in any pain whatsoever. You can't operate on pain, because pain is an experience. How do you operate on an experience? You can't drug pain, you can't massage pain, you can't manipulate pain, you can't even take away someone's pain, because it is an intensely subjective and personal experience. It's an experience, it's not a thing. But most of us grew up thinking it is a thing, and that concept dates way back. You can probably put it back to this man, Rene Descartes. He was a French philosopher and scientist, a very smart man, and he did a very famous study on pain. And his understanding of pain was, pain starts here, where the boy's being burnt, and then pain runs up the body. He thought the tube, and he got to the brain. And once the brain became aware of pain, the brain's only role was to pull the leg back, or to guard the body from moving. So Descartes' model of pain was brainless. It was a brainless model of pain, and there it is. Now, as a model of pain, it was good enough. It certainly worked when there was a broken bone and there was blood pouring out everywhere. It was good enough. But it didn't work for chronic pain. But over the next couple of 100 years, we developed an entire pain science based on this model. And in the 1960s, it finally dawned on people that Descartes was wrong. It was totally wrong. And we had been building an entire understanding of pain on a faulty model. That's the problem. So pain does not start here. Pain definitely doesn't travel to the brain. But something does. Something does. And so that's what I want to do tonight. I want to talk about that thing that travels. So I'm going to introduce you to one word. I want to stretch your vocabulary. Does everyone feel they can learn one word tonight? Bold. One word. And I'll break it up into little pieces. So I want everyone to say after me. Are you ready? No. C. This last bit's the only hard bit, so hang in there. Ception. Okay, we'll put it all together. What does it spell? Nociception. And again, nociception. From the guys in the room? And from the girls? Well done, New Zealand. And it's spelled like this, but we say it, nociception. Okay, so if we're going to say it, we better figure out what it means. So, remember I said our brain was stuck in a cavity in our head? And it has no access to the outside world, yet its job is to protect us from the outside world, but it has no access to the outside world. So we've come up with a very clever design. Scattered all around our body are receptors that are capturing information and sending it to the brain. That's what our eyes are. Our eyes are just receptors. They capture information about the world out there and send it to the brain. That's what our ears are. They are receptors. They are receiving information about the world around us and sending it to the brain. That's what our nose is. That's a receptor sending information to the brain. So the brain is being bombarded with lots of bits of information, and the brain has to answer one very important question. Am I safe? Am I safe? Is there anything I need to do here? So that's about the world out there. What about the world in here? Our body. So we also have these receptors that scatter through our skin, the spinal cord, some of our internal organs, and they are sending information back to the brain about the state of our body. Sending information. And these receptors, not our eyes, our nose, or our ears, these receptors are called nociceptors. And the message that they send to the brain is called, let's try that again. The message is called nociception, not pain. So when you cut yourself, a nociceptive message gets sent to the brain. It's not pain. It's not pain. That is really very important. It's not pain. It's just a message. It's just an electronic impulse down a nerve. It is not pain. It's objective, it's testable, it's measurable, but it's not pain. So when you cut yourself, nociception gets sent to the brain. It happens when you're awake, when you're asleep, if you're under general anaesthetic, if the surgeon cuts yourself, a nociceptive message goes to the brain. What happens next is important. Your brain receives that message. And remember, it's receiving messages, all eyes, ears, nose. Your brain also might receive a nociceptive message. Your brain needs to look at that and answer that same very important question. Am I safe? And if your brain makes the decision that you're not safe, then your brain needs to get your attention so that you change your behaviour. And the way the brain gets your attention to change your behaviour is pain. So pain doesn't start at the cut. Nociception runs to the brain makes a decision around safety, and if the brain decides your tissues are under threat, your brain then turns pain on. Let's stretch people a little bit. But here's the thing about nociception. That nociceptive message is sent to the brain for tissue damage or potential tissue damage. It's the exact same message that's getting sent to the brain. Tissue damage or potential tissue damage. How safe are we? That a message can get sent to the brain. You are not experiencing any actual threat. There is no actual damage. But it might be something. It might be a threat. So that message is sent to the brain, and the brain can turn on pain. So everyone in this room has, in some point, had a brain that has turned on pain, even though you have had no tissue damage whatsoever. That is a protective brain. So that's what nociception is. So nociception is tissue damage or potential tissue damage. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's nociception. But it gets a little bit more interesting than that. So, just a moment there, Chelsea. So, it's worth exploring our senses just a little bit more. So, when we see that message is getting sent to the brain as a message. So, is everyone clear that light stops at your eyeball? Your brain does not receive light. Everyone know that? So your eyeball has specialised cells that turns the light into electronic impulse that gets sent to the brain. So let's just test our hearing and our sight, shall we? So here's my friend Mr. McGurk. He's going to be just saying one word over and over and over. Hit it, Chelsea. And I want you just to listen what this man is saying. Very straightforward. I want you to pay very close attention. Okay, Chelsea. Okay. What was he saying? Far. Okay. F-A-R. Okay, everyone agree? Chelsea, can we go to the start of that video again? There we go. Now, in a moment, we're going to play that same video again. When you hear the word far again, I want you to then close your eyes, and we're going to be removing sensory input from your eyes. So you're just going to use your ears now. Now close your eyes. Now open your eyes. Pick a man. The only sound that ever came out of these speakers was bar. B-A-R. Bar, bar, bar. So your ears, was sending information to the brain, telling the brain, hey, there's a man out there saying, bar. But what you were seeing was a video of someone saying, far. And your eyes were detecting the lips, the bottom lip. So your eyes were sending information to the brain saying, hey, there's a man out there saying, far. So we're getting conflicting information between your senses. Now the brain has to make sense of this. And we are highly, highly visual. Humans are highly visual. If we hear something, we'll look to figure out what it is, because we trust our vision more than any other sense. If we were rhinoceroses, or rhinoceri, if you saw a threat, you would, because rhinoceroses trust their smell more than their eyesight, but humans, we trust our eyes. So when it comes to a conflict between our eyes and our ears, your brain, for good biological reasons, will assume that the eyes are telling the truth and have got an accurate representation of what's out there. And so your eyes will make an assessment that, yes, out there is a man saying far. And here's the thing. Because your eyes have made an assessment that outside your skull there is a man saying far, you hear far. Now that is profound. To contemplate that is profound. And what we're suggesting then is the experience of hearing is generated in your brain. So you're not hearing the world as it is. What you are experiencing right now is your brain's recreation of what it thinks is outside your skull. Now, that should stretch you just a little bit. The same applies to sight. You think you're seeing me right now, but what you're experiencing is your brain creating an image inside your head and projecting it outside your skull. So that's what we would say vision is. So that's sight, hearing, taste, and feeling, the sensory experience. So if you wiggle your hands, you will feel yourself wiggling your fingers. What you're actually experiencing is your brain creating the experience of you wiggling your fingers. And we know that because when amputees lose a limb, they can still feel their missing limb. And I know people that can wiggle toes that aren't there, they can wiggle fingers that aren't there. So they're still having the felt experience, even though they don't have a body part. Does that stretch you just a little bit? So then it's only just a little bit of an extra stretch to realise that if the brain can create vision and hearing and the felt sensation, then if your brain thinks that you are under threat, well then it makes perfect sense that it can create an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience to change your behaviour. That's what pain is. So you might come across this concept that all pain is in the brain. That's what neuroscience is trying to explain. All pain is generated in the brain. So the brain has got a big task to do. It's receiving all this sensory information, it's cross-referencing it with your past experience, with your beliefs, with your expectations. It's trying to figure out, how can I help this person? How can I keep this person safe? And can you see that the old biomechanical model of pain just fell woefully short? It just let so many people down. Because all we could do, if we couldn't find it and fix it, and then we try to drug it, and we know that doesn't really work well, that old model, all we could do is put a question mark on that person's pain. And we would question how true it actually is. And what we would say is all pain is real. All pain is real. But it's generated in the brain. And sometimes the brain can get it wrong. And when it gets it wrong with something like the McGurk effect, it's kind of quirky, kind of fun. That was fun, wasn't it? But when it gets it wrong with pain, it's not fun. It's suffering. And there's a stigma attached, which also doesn't help. Here's two people that have had a run-in with a nail. You make out what's happening there? Which person would you rather be? Nail in the head or nail through the boot? I guarantee that if you met these people in the streets, you would want to be the one with the nail in his head. Because that guy had a mild toothache, and he went to the dentist, got an x-ray, and they found a nail in his head. The other guy was a tradie, and he stepped on a nail, through the boot, intense pain. Intense pain. He was heavily, heavily sedated, and it just didn't touch it. And this guy was suffering. I went to the hospital, they took off the boot. That nail had gone straight between the toes. It did not even cut his foot. But this man was in real pain. Real pain. There's no way you can tell me that that man was not in pain. That was real physical pain. But in this case, like the McGurk effect that we just went through, his brain was paying more attention to his vision when the brain made that assessment of, am I safe? So, pain is an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience. It's not caused by tissue damage, it's associated with tissue damage. And we would say that nothing in the body can cause pain. Nothing in the body can cause pain, but it can certainly be associated with pain, and that's enough. And then the brain will turn on pain. Being stretched just a little bit. So pain is a protective response. It's meant to help us. It's meant to keep us safe. And the brain is paying attention to lots of different things. Is it paying attention to nociception? That word we all know? Yes. But keep in mind, nociception doesn't even have to be tissue damage. It can just be potential tissue damage. That's enough. Your brain's also paying attention to other sensory information, your past experience. Remember the Jaws experience from a few moments ago? Our past experience really matters. And then if your highly protective brain decides that you're under threat, your brain will turn on pain. We only need a brain. We don't even need a body. And a lot of these people with phantom limbs will also feel pain. Real physical pain. So that might stretch some of you tonight, but hopefully it stretches you to a point where you're starting to see options that you might not have considered before. So, imagine you get a text. Message comes in, I smell smoke. This is like a brain receiving one bit of information. That is not enough information for me to make a decision on that. Imagine I'd received this text. Ian, I smell smoke. I don't know whether I should call the fire brigade or what. So it's a lot like the brain. One bit of information is not enough. The brain needs to take a bigger perspective. So let's say the text is this: Dad, I smell smoke. Now, suddenly, because I'm a father, I'm a little bit more protective. So context is important. But I don't know whether my son is at a barbecue. Is he standing beside a petrol bowser? Does he have a cigarette in his mouth? This is still not enough information. So I need more information. You know, where are you? Where are you? Dad, I'm going for my Boy Scout badge. And I smell smoke. So can you see that that's an important bit of information that might have been missed? Do you think I should send a protective response? Be careful, son. Or should it be a little happy, clappy emoticon? What do you think? Depends. It still depends. What you don't know is my first son, my other son, when he was going for his Boy Scout badge, fire making badge, he had a horrible accident. He burnt down the scout hall. He killed his scout, Dan Master. 3 of his friends, he's dead. No, I'm joking. But imagine if that was true. Imagine if that was true. And now I'm getting this text. Get out. Be careful. So my past experience, of course it is relevant to answer that question, am I safe? So past experience is highly relevant. Well, let's just say that when I was a boy, I was really badly scalded in a bath. Hot water, it wasn't fire, but it was hot. Now in my brain, I've got an association between heat and danger. So I get this text, and I'm a little bit more cautious. Be careful. Because my brain's got an association now between heat. Or maybe when I was a Boy Scout, I was bullied or traumatised. So maybe it's not even the fire. Maybe it's just the fact of being in a Boy Scout is enough for me to go, get out, be careful. So context is everything when it comes to pain. You can have a nociceptive message about tissue damage or potential tissue damage. You can have that coming in one scenario and your brain will go, no worries. But in a slightly different circumstances, get out, get out. So context is everything. Imagine I just found out that I lost a $1 billion contract at work. And I get this text and I'm distracted. Yeah, whatever. Good. Distraction. We know that distraction plays a really interesting role in how the brain is processing information. We know that. So that might be useful for you. Let's just say that I belong to a religious cult who believes that the second coming of the Lord will be preceded by a whiff of smoke in the hands of a small child. Maybe. I'll be down in a sec. Everything. Your brain is paying attention to everything. Around you now, your past experience, conversations you've heard with a doctor, Aunt Mary, things that happened to you as a child, things that you've seen on television, things that a specialist has told you. All of those things are relevant when your brain's trying to answer this question, am I safe? Am I safe? And there's one thing that really throws that question, and that's chronic stress. So chronic stress changes the way messages flow through our body. It changes the way our brain processes the information. And I liken chronic stress to getting this text. I smell smoke, it's everywhere. Oh my God, it's absolutely everywhere. I mean, it's everywhere, we're all going to die. Ah! Now, do you think I'm more likely to overprotect and turn on pain? So chronic stress. We know that. We know that chronic stress is a major player in the production of the pain experience as well. So there's a lot going on with pain. It's not so straightforward. And that old biomechanical model of pain, it never worked really. And now that we're having such a major issue with chronic pain, 1 in 5 people suffer from chronic pain. 1 in 5. And as the age gets older, it starts to creep up towards 1 in 3. We know that medication has a pretty poor track record and side effects. So we need to think differently about pain. We need to talk differently about pain. So, I mentioned earlier that I wanted to talk about neuroplasticity. And this might be a term that you've heard before, it might be new to you. It's regarded as one of the greatest medical breakthroughs in the last 300 years. It certainly is a game changer. It's changed the way we think about mental health, physical health, performance, education. It's a game changer. But what role does it play in pain? Well, let's have a look at it. We used to think that the brain developed through childhood and early adolescence and early adulthood, and then it stopped, and then it was just a slow decline to old age, and that's as good as we got. And it turns out that not only were we wrong about that, we were embarrassingly wrong. And your brain's capacity to change stays with you until the day you die. Your brain can change, and it turns out it's an incredibly trainable organ. And what do you think changes the brain? Experience changes the brain. Remember that word from earlier? Experience changes your brain. So if you're learning to walk, that's an experience. That changes your brain. If you're learning a new language, that's an experience. It's changing your brain. If you're learning to juggle, that's changing your brain. And your brain's getting better and better and better and better at it until juggling, speaking French, easy. You've trained your brain to do certain things. If you do a 6-week meditation class, that changes the brain. certain parts of your brain will start to shrink. And of course, pain is also an experience. And so this term chronic pain, if someone's been in pain for 3 months, we call it chronic pain. What we can now say then is, if you've been in pain for 3 months, the chances of that pain experience being driven by nociception, remember nociception, tissue damage or potential tissue damage, well, we know things heal. We know the healing process. And for most things, after 8 weeks, most things that have healed will have healed. Tissues have healed. And so if you get to 3 months and you're still in the pain experience, we can now shift our focus. We can now say, okay, this pain experience is less likely to be driven by tissue damage. And maybe it's more likely to be driven by neuroplasticity and actual changes that have taken place in your nervous system, in your brain. So chronic pain is neuroplasticity in action. That's chronic pain. So if you've been in pain for 3 months, your brain has changed. But it's also really useful to think about where in your brain is changing. So most people are probably familiar with this idea that parts of the brain do different things. Is that familiar to most people? So we've got a language section and a memory section and an emotion section. We don't have a pain section. Maybe it'd be nice if we did, but we don't have a pain section. And one of the beauties of neural imaging and scanning is that we can look at someone in pain and we can look at their brain and go, well, what's going on here? And we don't have a pain section in the brain. But what we see is people's brains light up like a Christmas tree. It is a whole brain experience when someone is suffering from pain. But where? Where in the brain? So I've already talked about 2. Pain is an unpleasant sensory and an emotional experience. Not sensory or emotional, that's important. All pain is emotional. So there's 2 parts of the brain. The homunculus, that's for the sensory area, and the amygdala, that's for the emotional area. So these parts are firing off. But what else? Because there's about another 400 bits that we have to find. Everyone in this room has had a pain experience, even if you've stubbed your toe. What happens when you stub your toe? Ow! Okay, that's a part of the brain. That's the language part of the brain. When it's chronic pain, the language part tends to be more along the lines of, oh my God, here we go again. Or just sometimes it's just that's the language centre in the brain being active. The memory centre in the brain is active. When has this happened before? The cognitive part of the brain is firing up. What does this mean? It means I have to cancel this afternoon, or it means maybe I've overdone it, maybe I lifted that thing. So the cognitive part of the brain is firing off. Beliefs start to fire off. What do I believe is happening now? That's a part of the brain. Beliefs. You start to breathe differently when you're in pain. So the belief sector, the breathing part of the brain, your posture changes. It's often a slump and the head goes down, the eyes go to the right. You often get very good at paying attention to the bit that hurts. So you get really good at paying attention to a certain part. There's often a stress response. There's often an inner dialogue. We often do a stress response and tighten muscles. So it might be back pain, but we'll tighten certain muscles. And some of you, it might be the jaw, some of it might be the butt cheeks. But that is your pain experience. That is how we do pain. And there's another saying in neuroscience. Some of you might have heard this before. Just give me a nod if you've heard this before, or finish the sentence if you've heard it before, because I'd like to know how much this information has gone out there. What fires together, wires together. What fires together, wires together. What on earth does this mean? This means that all of these things have been active at the same time over and over and over. They've been firing together. So the brain wires them together. There are now physical neurons, physical structures going from the back of the brain to the front of the brain to the side of the brain. And that is called a neurotag, or a pain signature. We call it a signature because it is unique to you, your memories, your catchphrases, your inner dialogue, your emotions. All of that is unique to you. That is how you do pain. That is how you do pain. What fires together, wires together. And with practice, just like someone learning to juggle, just like someone learning a new language, with repetition, that experience changes the brain, those neural pathways get better and better and stronger and faster and more efficient, and you get to a point where you are really very, very good at protecting yourself in pain. But often people are now way overprotected in pain. And there's another really important term that's used in neuroscience. You might not have heard this one. Call it out if you know it. So there's the saying, what fires together wires together, but what's wired together, thank you very much, fires together. What's wired together, fires together. You might have heard of a Russian scientist called Pavlov. You ring a bell, you give a dog food, you ring a bell, you give a dog food. What fires together wires together, then you ring a bell and the dog salivates. Because what's wired together fires together. Now this is your pain circuitry. It's a whole brain experience. That is your pain circuitry. It's now operating as a single unified unit, turning on pain to protect you. And here's the thing, what's wired together fires together. It means that you only need to trigger one of these points and it can fire up the whole pain circuitry. So what does this mean practically? Well, it means that if your brain has come to associate the moving of a body part with the pain experience, the very act of moving that body part can turn on pain. So your brain is protecting you because it's detected that you're moving a body part. Well, what happens if the nociception is long gone and there's no tissue damage? Then you can easily see that someone is overprotected through pain. And they're stuck. They're stuck. And that's just with body movement. What about some of these other things? What about emotion? All pain has an emotion. All pain has an emotion. And it can be really useful if you're suffering from pain to think about, what is my pain signature? And what is my emotion? Sometimes it's fear. It's often fear. But sometimes it's sadness. Sometimes it's anger and frustration. But there's always, by definition, an emotion present. So it might give you some options and some room to stretch, to start to think about your pain in a broader sense. But because what's wired together fires together, it means that if you have an experience that you're firing up an emotion like fear or stress, let's say it has nothing to do with your body, it's more to do with you at work, you're worried about losing a job or stressed about a deadline or fearful for politics or terrorism or the stock market crash, it really doesn't matter. You experiencing that emotion can fire up your entire pain circuitry and boom, you're experiencing pain. It's got nothing to do with your body now. Now it is just tapping into your pain circuits. And so, the largest study ever done on back pain showed that mood is a better predictor of back pain than incident or accident. Mood. And when 9/11 came and the Twin Towers came down, you had a whole country moving into a fear state. Maybe a whole world cranking up a notch in a fear state. And you get a corresponding rise in back pain. Now these are not candidates for surgery, except they are. They're not candidates for injections and manipulations and movement, except unfortunately they are. So this is why knowledge is power. The more you understand pain, the less likely you are to go down a pathway of invasive action. There is nothing to do with the body here. This has to do with your pain circuitry and you being overprotected through pain. So, one of the things that we know about pain, with chronic pain, one of the things that is absolutely important in your journey into good health is the role that exercise plays. Relearning how to be in a body and moving. And there's a wonderful saying, very easy to remember. Motion is lotion. Anyone heard that before? A couple of nods there. Motion is lotion. I'm sure you'll hear more of it. Motion is lotion. It's a good one. However, there's a caveat. There's a little extra piece that I'd like to add to that. It's not just motion is lotion, it's confident motion is lotion. Because if you're told that exercise is important for you, because you're in chronic pain and the doctor says, we need to get you moving, we need to get you exercising, and so you go out there and exercise. But if your understanding of pain is very biomechanical, then exercise is scary. It's a little bit fearful. Well, pain is fearful. You might worry that pain means you're doing more damage. And so the very act of exercising is scary, and that fires up a pain experience, and you're stuck in pain. And so what are your options? Well, your options are just to push through or to avoid. And that is the options that are given to most people in chronic pain and chronic fatigue. You either push through or you avoid it. There's another option. There is another option to retrain the brain and the nervous system that exercise is safe. So, I was at a pain conference recently, and in the room were mostly surgeons and GPs and specialists. And it was it was a lecture on osteoarthritis and knee pain. And these doctors were being ripped to shreds. And they were being told, in no uncertain terms, if anyone in this room is still using the term wear and tear or bone on bone, you should be thrown out of the industry. Imagine that. Anyone ever heard those terms before? Wear and tear, bone on bone. So here's the problem. We know that exercise is one of the best things you can do with osteoarthritis knee pain. We know that's well researched, get out there and exercise. But if your brain has picked up something from a healthcare practitioner, our brains are highly biased to believe something that comes out of an authority figure, and we're out there exercising, and we've been told bone on bone. What is the image that you think your brain is creating in your head of one bone grinding on another bone? So exercise then becomes a threat that's associated with tissue damage. And guess how your brain will protect you? When your brain thinks that there's an association with tissue damage, it turns on pain and you're stuck. Again, you're stuck with this, do I push through or do I just give up? And there is another option. So the way we talk about pain matters. The way we think about pain, that really matters. So our beliefs around our bodies, around pain, about the world around us, all of that matters. All of that really, really matters because it gets into the brain and it influences that decision-making process of am I safe? Of course it does. And then there's a big elephant in the room. What do we do about anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, childhood traumas, adverse childhood experiences? In the old model, they were an inconvenience. They were an inconvenient truth because research shows that the overlap between adverse childhood experiences and trauma and anxiety and depression, they're massive. But when you're thinking in that find it and fix it model, and you hear that someone's suffering from anxiety, what used to happen was, it used to set a little red flag. Okay. Now I understand why they're suffering in pain because it's all in their head. That's all we could do with that old model. Now that we have a much better understanding of pain, we can go, oh, okay, I get that. The pain is real, and yes, it's being influenced by past experience. Of course it does. I work with a lot of people with post-traumatic stress disorder, and they are walking around the planet with a belief, I'm not safe. And do you think that influences the brain in its assessment of threat? Of course it does. And then the question then is, well, which one do we work on first? Do we work on the anxiety or do we work on the pain? Now, I'm not saying that anxiety is chronic pain. I'm not saying that PTSD is chronic pain or depression is chronic pain. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm saying they are absolutely integrated. They are linked. They are so linked. So the work that I do, we work on them both at the exact same time. The same time. And in many ways, there's an overlap there because both anxiety or trauma and pain, they are all very much about the brain's inaccurate assessment of threat. So of course they're interlinked. So the work that I do, first of all, teaches people a really up-to-date understanding of pain. That they really understand pain. And so that allows them to understand, okay, my body is safe. My body is safe. And then they go out in the world with a knowing that their body is safe, and they deconstruct the pain experience. So they are taught to not only be mindful, but also take charge of their emotional state, of their stress response. But much more than that, they're also trained to take charge of their language and their memories and their beliefs and their breathing and their posture. Every single one of these. So they're deconstructing the pain experience. And there's another saying in neuroscience, what fires apart, wires apart. So they're doing life differently. So they're moving through the world with this belief, I am safe. The other thing that we do in my work is to really turn things on its head. And we get people to understand that the biggest threat to your life is not exercising. The biggest threat to your life is not actively going out there and starting to move towards your goals. That is the biggest threat, because my body is safe. So that's a big shift for the brain. And there's lots of approaches to chronic pain. There are lots of approaches, and some are really very cool. We're starting to get into altered reality glasses now that trick the brain to turn off pain. That's cool. That's really cool. There are so many options now available, but it starts by changing how you think about pain. And I'm conscious of time, so I'll wind up. Hopefully I've stretched you. Hopefully I've stretched you just a little bit, but stretch you towards more options rather than shutting down options. Pain is not the enemy. I think misunderstanding pain is the enemy. That's the enemy. So if you're someone in the room that is suffering from chronic pain, I hope that I have stretched you towards more options to start to think about not just the body, but also the brain's role. And what are some things that I haven't looked at now, so I can train my brain to turn off pain and know that I'm safe. And if you're someone in the room that is studying about pain or works with people in pain, I guess it's just a reminder to be really up to date with modern pain science, but also you don't work in pain, you work with people. Very, very different things. You work with people. And be very mindful of the language you use and the beliefs that you pass on, particularly your beliefs around that person's fragility or lack of structural integrity or requirement to be careful, because all of that plays into pain. So we have an incredibly adaptive body, incredibly adaptive. We have an incredibly adaptive nervous system, an incredibly adaptive brain, and my hope is that people are stretched a little so they can really use all of that information wisely and get on and live the best possible life you can. That's me. Thank you. Thank you.
Ian, thank you